Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Most of the Canadian prime ministers, with a few exceptions of course, couple of them, but many, have great love for the Chinese system. Not the Chinese people essentially, but the Chinese system. Authoritarian, dictatorial, and being what they are, Chinese system holds an eternal charm. The first was, of course, Pierre Trudeau, and now his son. And because their wish to be dictators in the shape Chinese are is not fulfilled because of the inherent love of the Canadians for democracy. They have chartered their policies that the political system may not be exactly like that, but the economic system resembles that. Yesterday I talked how Chinese economy is in fact a paper tiger, is faltering, is crumbling. Similarly, the Canadian economic system is closely following, very closely, right on the heels, and is a classic example of faltering economy, lack of dynamism. If you look at the economic history of Canada, you would find that since 1930s, these last 2 years have seen the slowest economic growth, not only in G8 countries, G20 countries, but practically if you look at the globe's 50 countries, Canadian economy has been faltering and it's at the lowest level. This study was recently conducted and it has been seen that Canadian economic growth measured by GDP, adjusted for inflation of course, over the past decade was the slowest since the 1930s. The result, it stalls productivity, it hampers the country's ability to encourage innovation, and it inhibits the new business startups. Compare the startups in Canada with the USA, India, even Vietnam. There are much too many. Canadian system, economic system, displays many of the same symptoms of business malaise and disease evident in China and in most of the European nations. Real GDP over the past decade was the slowest, as I said, since 1930s. And it has reduced competitiveness. Result, it has hampered Canada's ability to capitalize on the trade deals, all of which combine to lower our share of the global GDP. That's the biggest problem. The politicians fail to realize that if we do not capitalize on the trade deals, and we only believe in giving aid and things like that, then it's not going to solve the issue. It's going as a matter to make the situation worse confounded. The sluggish economic growth in the years before the pandemic, let's not talk of the pandemic at present, but before the pandemic, if you see, reflects a lack of innovation, weak productivity growth, and that has persisted since 2011, but heightened in 2014. The prolonged slump cannot be fully addressed. Let's accept that. It cannot be addressed with empty political slogans or with the current prevailing approach. The current approach of policies regarding targeting of specific sectors such as high technology, green energy, are spurring research and development in the vain, false, unacceptable hope of boosting one or more of these variables. Now, that is a tragedy. We aim for something, but we do not charter the way to achieve that aim. We believe in the not in the journey, but in the destination. And if you travel to a destination without charting your journey, you are bound to fail. Journey is equally important. And the worst is acceding to endless requests by the government from specific groups, industries, or firms. Requests are for favors in name of job creation or higher income. This is a sort of a camouflage the corporate sector plays. Well, give us this aid and we'll generate new jobs. And when I read the newspapers, see the headlines, see this city is going to create 3,000 jobs, another city going to create 5,000 jobs, this province is going to create 100,000 jobs. And then I look, where is the unemployment then? If all these jobs are being created, why does Canada have 8.7% unemployment and 29.3% underemployment? What Canada needs is a root and branch re-examination of its public policy. And that public policy is a mix. You cannot have a one solution for every issue. So you need a proper mix. And then there has to be commitment. Commitment to the market, commitment to open, fair, transparent competition, and capitalism. And the goal is to create an environment more conducive to greater business formation and investment. Just one example. Only 3 major companies are dominating the internet market. Does it happen anywhere in the free world? No. Look at USA. The rates are less than 1/3 than are prevailing in Canada. Look at India. The rates are about 1/10 than prevailing in India. So, there is an oligarchy in corporate sector. And that is being made sustained by the political leadership because there has been no audit of the policy mix and there is no commitment either to transparency or to competition, fair competition. And the environment is not conducive to greater business formation. I talked earlier about startups. There are no startups. Compared with USA, and we pride ourselves on being next door neighbor of USA, Canada possesses fewer of the societal values linked to innovation and dynamism. As a society, the culture, we are not innovative, we lack dynamism. We were number one, for example, in wireless system in BlackBerry. Where are we today? We were the first to come up with a penicillin. And now we have to depend on other countries to give the vaccine for corona. Why is it that this country, which was in the front line of R&D, of innovation, whether it was telephone, whether it was mobiles, whether it was medical profession, where are we? We used to have 95% of the world's isotope production. Where are we today? So what has happened is that these reduced societal values linked to dynamism and innovation have been thrown in the waste paper basket. And the lack of those values that support innovation and business is not evident And the reliance of the firms on the government to protect them from competition in the marketplace is the first thing. Helping industry, manufacturing in times of dire need is required. But to get freebies, get aid, in season and out of season, every time, is a mark of lethargy and parasitic attitude. And Canada has developed that parasitic attitude right from the word go. The immigrants who come, if they come as refugees, wow, they live a much luxurious life than they ever lived in their hometown. If they come as real hardworking people, then they have to go through the mill. And that is a tragedy. There is a premium on honest work. And when the premium is there on the honest work, negative one, of course, not compensation, but just hard work, then the innovative spirit is sapped. And the reliance of the firms on the government, imagine SNC Lavalin getting government aid. Imagine the media getting $600 million. So what happens then? The result is a weak growth and encourages policies targeting the distribution over the creation of income. It's not the creation of income that's the aim of the industry then. It's a distribution. And that aggravates the shortfall of the growth. The growth is already low. The consumption pattern is heavily dependent on imports. And that's again the tragedy. We are not manufacturing even for our own needs. We want things that depending on 4 or 5 things, lentils for the export, some dairy, but not much because we can't compete with USA, we can't compete with New Zealand, we cannot compete with Scandinavian countries. And we do not think that we need to build a brand of our own. 90% of the brands you go to the market are either American or European. So those are the values that support innovation. And the result is you are where you were. Too many business models in Canada today are based on the government using a thicket of regulations, patents, tariffs, occupational licensing rules, restrictions on the foreign investment, and price fixing to shelter firms from the competition. Now, are you aware that if you are a qualified architect or a chartered accountant in Ontario, you can't come and practice as a chartered accountant in, say, in Quebec. You have to get the license renewed. Now, isn't that ridiculous? Why can, and sometimes you see the interprovincial trade barriers, and I've written a lot about that, are much worse. It's easy to export a product, say from Ontario to Timbuktu, but exporting a product from Ontario to Saskatchewan or to Alberta, the paper trade is too humongous. So all that, the licensing rules, the tariff, the patent rules, regulations, they differ from province to province. So these tools basically obstruct honest, fair, frank competition. And they are easily promoted by the government in Canada's decentralized federation. In rules and regulations, there should be centralization because one rule should be applicable to all the provinces. We have decentralized our federation, and these provinces are almost Mughal empires in themselves. Each one of them has its own rule. The outcome is significant loss to business dynamism in Canada. The dynamics have changed, and the result, our leading corporations are shunted from the global stage, while lower rate of return, entry and exit signals the process which reduces creation of jobs, and that creates further unemployment. There is basically a fundamental impediment to innovation and dynamic economy. An economic development model is needed, and in that model, government would cater to the interests of the individual firms and specific industries, which is happening at present. That should change. So it has to change to a new model that promotes entrepreneurship, not the industry, but the entrepreneurship, not the old system of letting the sick units exist, but have been put on ventilator, but to promote the business growth. And that's required because the present system undermines the public faith that incomes are granted. The impression should be incomes are earned and capital can generate. Then what will happen? The capital, both the human and the financial, would generate innovation and benefit Canada as a whole. Now look at the progress of USA, China, India. They are maintaining a high rate of innovation. And they also demonstrate that Canada's lacking performance is not the result of structural forces that are hard to control. They are the result of the lack of the proper policies. They are more the product of government policies and, more important, of societal attitudes that are within the control of the people and of the government. But that's not happening. We had the pleasure of having a Minister of Innovation, and we shouted from the top of the housetops, well, we are the only country having a Minister of Innovation. And at that time, and even now I say, do they really understand what innovation is? No, they don't. Canada's innovation policy continues to be mistaken. It focuses on inputs of knowledge, believing, wrongly of course, there is no truth in that education, science, research and development, and government subsidies fuel innovation. None of that does. Innovation is not dependent on R&D alone. Is not dependent on the government policies alone. Is not dependent on freebies alone. But is dependent on the mix, proper mix of the government policies and the societal change. It doesn't need aid to the existing industries. It needs to fuel innovation in the youth. The concept of innovation would automatically come in when the policies are developmental in nature. Our policies are not developmental, they are sustaining. Whatever is there, let it be sustained that. Let no entry be there of the foreign investment. Sprint wanted to come to Canada, and had Sprint come, the oligarchy of Rogers, Bell and Shaw would have been demolished. Canada didn't permit it. Why? Was it because they didn't like it? No. They knew that the funding by the companies to the political parties would be reduced. So it has been selfish interest which has sapped the innovation spirits of the Canadians and the absolute lack of the proper policy mix That was the sine qua non of innovation and business dynamism. I feel the time has come for the government to have a hard look at it and do the needful. Otherwise, people would say Canada, which used to be a great country, it was innovative. I talked of the penicillin, I talked of the BlackBerry, I talked of the telephone. They were great achievements. Where is Canada today? Nowhere. So this is a thing to think about and to make policies that are relevant and progressive rather than having the same old regressive policy mix. Thank you.